Hi everyone, 7 here. Before I start this video off, I want to say a quick thanks for 1K. With such an inconsistent upload schedule, I am super honored and surprised that so many of you have chosen to stick by and that you enjoy my videos. So yeah, thank you so much. So I know I've been promising a voice tutorial for the longest time, and it is finally here. For this piece, I am going to explain some of my thought processes and explain some of the reasons behind why I pick my colors. So before I start, this will be my personal opinion on all the colors that I'll be choosing, etc. So if something doesn't make sense or you don't agree with happens, feel free to just ignore it. And I'm also not really big with art terminology, so if I sound ignorant, feel free to let me know in the comments below, or just go easy on me. Thank you. Right, so as a first step, I like to paint in the areas that I'll be working on in a bit. I'm picking green as my basis because I'll be using green a lot considering the environments that I'm dealing with, and it's just going to save me some time later to have to paint all of these green back into my scene. And for the water as well, I am going to just do a simple gradient of blue just to save me some extra time. The first thing I'm actually going to paint in will be a darker blue. It's going to be the shadow of the blue bridge on the pond. This will just help me set up the space and volume that's within this shot a lot better, because we have the bridge going over the pond. And speaking of the bridge, I am going to be painting in the tree trunk at this point. I'm using a grayish color because, as you know, basic as the more conventional wood color would be, I feel like I have a lot of really cool tones within this shot to so that the brown color wouldn't really stand out, right? Or it would just feel a little bit weird at this point. So that's why I'm using a grayish hue for this guy. And in the early stages, I am just going to be painting in the bigger chunks, bigger color portions, just set up the color relationship within all of these bigger pieces. For example, for the mosses, I know it's green and it's in light, so that is why I'm giving it a bit of a warmer hue as I go, something a little bit more yellowish or orange-ish. And usually after I am done with these bigger color pieces, I like to start experimenting a little bit with Photoshop's auto functions. And in this case, I really liked the colors that's given to me through the auto color function. So I'm not the biggest fan of the contrast that it's given me, so I am going to ditch that and only take the color, which has got a nice purple hue to it, and use that from this point onwards. And the reason why I have my color panels detached all the time is because I pick colors quite often, and it's just going to make my process a little bit easier and a little bit faster. In terms of actual color picking, let's use a green as an example. It is very simple and straightforward to just say, let me do a green dot here. It is very easy for me to just go in and then pick a darker green as a counterpart and a lighter green as well for my lights and shadows. Of course that works, but you are only really working with a single color at this point. So that's why I like to take in the temperature of the light into consideration. For example, usually sunlight is going to be warm, that's why I'm going to use a warmer green in this situation, something that's a little bit more yellow, a little bit more orangey. And then for the shadowy area, something that has a blue or purple hue would do nicely. So using this step is a nice way to expand the colors that is going to be in your shot, right? So if you only have green, that's only one color, but if you're using the other method that I just talked about, you're going to have 3 colors instead. And you're also going to be able to play around with the saturation as well, or just simply the colors that you're picking. Usually the shadowy areas are going to be less saturated because just light is not hitting it. But if you instead go for a really saturated blue or purple in this situation for your shadows, you're just going to have a really cool or a really special look at the end of your drawing process, right? So not only does these sort of methods give you a really cool option to expand your colors, but also it can give you some options to explore certain different styles, right? Like how saturated you want your shadows to be, you want your light to be, or just even what kind of colors would you want your lights and shadows to be. Right? I purposely do that sometimes just to give my piece a really unique look, and I think it's something that it's one of the bigger things that I like to do when it comes to color picking. And at this point, I am just going to go in and then start to work on some details bit by bit. I also like to expand some of the color variations within a bigger chunk of color. So now for that big purple area to the left of the screen, I personally like to add in a bit of a blue hue to it as well here and there whenever I can, to make sure that the shadow wouldn't be just a solid chunk of color and it would have just some more variety within it. Same thing with the other shadows. You can see I'm using something that's a little bit more bluish here and there, just to make things a bit more varied, a bit more interesting to look at. And you can do the same with the light areas as well. Right? You can always sneak in something a little bit more warmer, like a red speck here and there, just to make your light feel even warmer, to bring out that nice contrast between light and shadow. So right now I'm going to be using a default brush to block out some of the finer details. For example, the grass, that is going to be in light and shadows, whatever, all the smaller bits that it's not really doable through my bigger blocking brush. And in terms of the water, try to use a lot of gradient, because usually for these situations we are dealing with a really flat, really smooth surface, reflective as well. So you really want to sell that nice smoothness through gradients. Right here I'm using a darker green on the edges, give it a bit of depth. Same thing with the sky reflection, using a light blue so that it stands out. Lily pads are pretty standard. As long as you remember, some of them are in light, some of them are in shadow, you should be all good. I also really wanted the lily pads to stand out from the water. That's why I'm using something that is a little bit warmer, a reddish hue on top of it, so that they stand out and they're visible. For the lily pads that are closer to the camera, I personally like to pick something that is more saturated, a little bit more vibrant, so that people can see it when they look at this piece. And on the opposite end, the lily pads that are further away from us, I am just going to use a duller color, right, so that they wouldn't stand out as much and people are not going to get drawn towards them. Character-wise, I am going to start off by blocking in this area first as well. And in terms of actually painting the characters, you really want to think about three things. Right? What are the character's original colors? What are the colors that's surrounding this character, and where is the light coming from? In this situation, the character has orange hair and just a darker cape in general. So I am going to be working with the basic colors, in this case orange and just a darker cape, but I'm also trying to work in that green surrounding the character as best I can. And also the light is coming from atop the character, that's why top of the head and shoulders will be receiving light. So usually I like to take a step after the character is done, just to make sure they're blending in properly. But yeah, I think this is about it when it comes to the full layout of this shot. As you can see, there's still a lot of detail work left to be done, but at this stage I am pretty much comfortable with the colors that I have, and I don't really want to go overboard with colors when I'm detailing. Right? I don't want there to be every single color in the world present in my drawing, and that's just going to make things super chaotic. So even if I need to do a bit of a deviation as I draw, it's only going to be a slight difference here and there, just to make sure things are a little bit more interesting. So that's why I'm going to be speeding things up quite a bit over here, my usual speed paint speed. And yeah, like when it comes to detailing the mosses, you kind of want to think of what would happen in nature. Right? Instead of like a solid chunk of green, you think, okay, there are pieces that might be newly formed that's going to have a really light, really like yellowish hue to it. Right? It's super tiny and just came out. Right? But you are also going to be having the older leaves that is dying. It's going to be a little bit brownish, a little bit less saturated. So you want to have those kind of specks within the plants that you're doing. And you might also have small flowers in here and there. So you want to have that nice variation. You want to have a bit of a speck here and there, but don't go overboard. Just a little bit would be enough, and just add in so much character and detail to your piece. So for example, I am using some green, some like brown, blue, yellow, and red even in this piece, and it's just going pretty well in my opinion. And same thing with the other foliage. Of course, you also want to think about their position within the shot. You don't want to give the same attention to all of them throughout. Right? Sometimes you don't want people to pay too much attention to the areas that you don't want them to look at. Right? For example, in this situation, I don't really want people to be looking at the screen left of this drawing too much. That's not where the character is. Right? So I'm just going to make things less saturated. Hopefully they don't stand out as much. So that people wouldn't look at them as much as the right side of the piece. And that is pretty much it for the water. I am just going to make them even smoother. I don't really like the brush strokes that I had at the beginning, and also I'll be clearing out some of the line arts later on as well. But yeah, as you work, you really want to focus on the piece as a whole, right? You don't want the character to be super detailed. You don't want certain areas to be like really different from the rest. So it's always a good idea to zoom out once in a while, or just take a look on the right side, or just see like a smaller picture, and that way you wouldn't lose yourself in all of the details. And in the end, yeah, it's about adding in some highlights here and there. That's my favorite part. But I think that about summarizes my process. As you can see, there's nothing fancy really with what I did over here. It's mainly about just sneaking in that little color variations as much as you can. And it just brings out the characteristics of your piece. And it's the end result, even though it might feel really trivial as you're making them, the end result will just be so much better. You see a lot of colors instead of just a single tone throughout your drawing. And yeah, so that kind of concludes my tutorial for now. If you're interested in some of the more detailed areas within my drawings, so for example, how to set mood within a piece, or how would you do a character, etc., perspective is a good area as well. Feel free to let me know in the comments below. Making these tutorials is surprisingly a lot of hard work for me, but I will definitely try to make them happen if you are interested. So thank you again for 1K, and thank you again for your continued support. I am just really happy. And yeah, Happy New Year, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.